Hey, what's up? It's Sam from HAAS Alert. Today we're here with the HA-4 Cellular Transponder, and we're going to do an installation video to show you how this thing can go on this truck in about 15 minutes. So to do this installation, you're going to need a basic set of fire apparatus electrical system tools and a familiarity with the fire truck electrical system that you're working on. So if you look over here, we've got our basic set, a drill. This is a Deutsch tool to remove pins. You've got a basic socket set, solder, heat shrink, some zip ties to clean up your wiring. You may need some extra wire. If you're pulling out pins and replacing that sort of pieces of the truck, you'll want a Deutsch pin tool and you want Deutsch pins. Some mounting tape might be helpful if you're installing this device and you're not screwing it in place. And then a basic set of crimpers, strippers, and screwdrivers so you can access the electrical system. If you're not comfortable with the electrical system on your apparatus, reach out to your apparatus manufacturer for some support on how the truck is laid out. All right, so the first step in the actual installation is going to be laying out the electrical hardware and the mounting location. Because what we want to do is find a place for this device to be able to see the atmosphere as best as we can. So it really needs to be somewhere not hidden like in the back of the truck under a seat, but somewhere that's more or less visible to the open air. Because this thing has a GPS module inside, so just like any car GPS, that's something we're going to want to do. So if you take a look inside the cab, on this particular truck, there's a nice little corner right here I might lay this thing in. So you'll want to figure out where the device can be installed and then where you're going to route your wiring. There's no sense in cutting into the electrical system until we've really identified how this is going to lay out. And so this particular application looks like it's going to go well right here. You can fish this wiring down and under, and our electrical system for this truck is right here in the middle compartment. So the next step we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to find some of the wires that are going to be good to attach the power, ground, and trigger wires from. So when you're actually installing this device, if you look here on the harness, you've got 4 wires. These 2 are going to be your grounds. That's going to go to any of your ground bus bars on the apparatus. This one's going to be your E-master trigger. So when the warning lights are on and the truck is supposed to be transmitting, that's going to be powered up. And this red wire is going to be constant 12 volts. You really don't want this to be battery switched. This has a low voltage shutoff, so it shouldn't kill your truck battery system. Anyway, let's show you where this stuff goes. So now that we're inside the truck, I'm going to show you a couple of parts on this rig where the electrical system comes in and help identify some areas where you can tie in to install this device. So in this rig, what you'll see is this is kind of your main auxiliary relay module where your battery power and grounds come in. And then underneath here, these are some of the electrical system nodes. This is a multiplex truck. This could be the same as a straight wired truck. It doesn't really matter either way. You're just looking to identify the circuits where we can tie in. So here you'll see battery power. This is probably 12 volt constant. You'll see an ignition power. That's probably when the ignition switch is on. There's a ground lug, and that looks like a master feed. So what we'll do is we'll probe these components. We want to find out what everything does before we start cutting into the electrical system so that we know exactly what each circuit's laid out for and how it's going to operate, when the truck is turned on. Now, something to look for here, this is going to be a ground bus bar, and in the NFPA standard, it really talks about having home run battery grounds instead of body grounds, and you really need to make sure that you install this stuff so that it matches the NFPA guidelines. That includes using ground bus bars instead of body grounds. T-taps are not really allowed, so you really need to solder those things in place. And then, of course, obviously fusing things appropriately. So one of the cool parts about the fire truck electrical system is that it is laid out with labeled wiring in most NFPA compliant, well, all NFPA compliant apparatus. So you'll see here this says transmission temp override, and this is a neutral start. So this is probably not something that's going to be a harness with warning lights on it. And what we're looking for is a warning light or emergency master harness. So as you pull through these harnesses, just read what's on them. You see here, this one says warning 2, one of these says warning 1. So something like that's probably an indicator that you're on a wire where you can hook on for your E-master trigger. So what you'll do is take your meter, hook one end to ground, hook one end onto the other side of this piece here, and then check and make sure that it does come on when the warning lights are on and it turns off when the warning lights are off. If that's the case and you want to consult your apparatus electrical schematic just to make sure this thing can handle the few milliamps of added load. 9 times out of 10, there's no problem tying right into one of these things. You'll just want to consult your apparatus manufacturer's layout, make sure you don't overcurrent that circuit. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and install on this wire here after we probe it. We're going to grab a ground here and a constant battery here, and we'll be in good shape. All right, so when we're doing the installation, I've got the wiring run so that it pops out from underneath here. I ran it nice and clean through that existing grommet. The wiring comes up, and what I'm going to do is hook this ground wire to this terminal block right here. So what I've done is taken both the ground, the black and the green. I'm going to solder them together and then put a pin on the end so that I can just pin it right into this ground terminal, and it'll be super clean and done correctly. And then next thing up, pull out this Deutsch part. Pop out the wedge lock. And then just push this thing in. Here till it clicks. Pin seated. Put the wedge lock back in. Reinstall the ground bus bar, and then I'm going to take and melt this heat shrink down so that it's solid and in good shape. All right, so now that the ground is hooked up, the next thing we're going to do is put the power wire on a fuse so that we can then bring it down over here to where our constant 12-volt power source is coming up from the battery. So in order to lay this out correctly, we're going to solder these two pieces together. The red wire is going to be your constant 12 volts. We'll solder and heat shrink it here, and then I'll put a ring terminal here so we can put it here. There's just a 5-amp fuse in here. You can use a 2.5 or a 5. The device only draws a few hundred milliamps, so you should be in good shape. All right, so now we're going to make the solder connection. Go ahead and put this in place. And then we'll slide the heat shrink over. And on the other side, we'll put our ring terminal. This is going to go over that battery stud. We're going to crimp it in place. All right, so the last step before we make all the final connections is going to be hooking up the trigger wire. So I did my back probing and I found right down here, this is going to be warning wire 1. So you'll see it's labeled warning 1. I checked the truck's electrical schematic. This is set up in the load management system to make sure that circuit's fused and protected against high current loads, so I don't need to put a fuse on this piece. If you're unsure, always err on the side of caution and fuse it, but because I checked this thing, we're good to go. So then what I'm going to do is go ahead and cut that wire, and I'm going to solder this trigger wire right in place so that we've got active trigger whenever the apparatus has its E-master engaged. All right, so now we've got these wires laid out. You've got your heat shrink slid over both. You've got the trigger wire here. This is that wire that we just cut to tap into. So now I'm going to go ahead and twist these together and make a mechanical connection, and then I'm going to solder to seal it off. Okay, our wire connection is finished, and now I'm going to go ahead and tie up this electrical system, make it nice and clean, and then go through our test procedure. All right, now that we've got the trigger hooked up, we've got the ground hooked up, we're ready to make the final connection for our master power. And before we do this, we want to make sure that the apparatus battery is disconnected, because you don't want to take a master stud off and accidentally touch the wrench to the body. You'll have a short circuit. The other thing to do before we make this connection is going to be to pop this fuse holder open and make sure the fuse is removed before you install it. So then we can hook this thing on, and then we can put power on the device only when we want it. So the apparatus power has been disconnected on this thing, so we'll go ahead and pull off this master battery stud and make our connection. All right, so we'll slide this guy over top. Put our nut back on. Now that that's installed, we'll go ahead and clean up the wiring. Make sure this thing's all nice and tightly attached. We'll zip tie all the old harnesses together. We'll tie all these pieces down so that it's nice and clean, and make sure that they're labeled so that you know what everything does. And then we're gonna go through the testing procedure, and we'll show you how to make sure this thing's operating. But that's it, we're done. So in order to test this thing out for the first time, you'll want to pull the truck out of the bays, have it so that the GPS device can get a clear view of the sky, and then we'll run through the test procedure where we'll put the fuse in, and I'll show you how this thing boots up. So just get the truck out of the bays and we'll go from there. All right, so now that we've got the truck outside in the sun, we're gonna go through this boot up procedure to show you how to test this thing. So you'll put the fuse back in the fuse holder. The device is going to come online, and what happens during the boot up process is you'll see this little LED. It starts off red, and that red indicates that it doesn't have cell phone or GPS connectivity. Once it turns yellow, it's going to start looking for satellite connectivity for the GPS and acquiring the cell phone signal. After that, it's going to turn green, and green indicates that you're ready to go. This could take a few minutes for it to happen, so give it some time. Once you've got a green light, this is going to be ready mode, and we're able to start testing our response functions, which are really how the HAAS cloud works. So the way to test the response function is going to be to fire the truck up and turn the E-master on. What we're going to look for is these top 4 lights are going to turn solid red. Solid red indicates responding. After 1 minute of operation, or when you get to the fire scene, that solid red is going to start flashing, and that flashing indicates that you've got a geofence around it, indicating an incident location. That's it, you're done. If you have any problems with this thing, check out our troubleshooting guide or give a call to the HAAS Alert team. We're happy to take care of you. But overall, this installation is pretty straightforward. It should take you a few minutes to do, but once it's installed, you'll have trouble-free operation for the life of the apparatus. Have a good day.